Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon, joined by the Ruckettes, Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abahaka, Urban League CEO. They didn't get shots of the people, I guess.
Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
It was, yeah. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon, joined by the Ruckettes, Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abahaka, Urban League CEO Gwen Grant, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran, and lobbyist Woody Cozad. Jobs are growing on the sunflower side of state line, but the show-me soil is not so productive. The latest jobs report indicates the Kansas side of the metro area gained 9,500 jobs over the past 12 months. The Missouri side, 0. The Missouri Torch political website is also warning that construction jobs are flocking to Kansas City, Kansas, where 1,400 jobs have been added over the past year, pushing the total of construction workers to roughly 18,000. The Missouri side has lost 1,600 jobs during that same period, dropping to just under 22,000. We hear a lot of talk about what's wrong with Kansas. Might this suggest that something is right? Woody?
Well, I hate to admit it, but yes, it might. For decades, for as long as I can remember, governors, Republican or Democrat, Kansas or Missouri, nobody has wanted to really lead on tax rate reduction or regulatory reform, simplification, anything like that. The idea of making the place more business friendly has been, let's kick the trial lawyers around. Disclaimer, I represent the trial lawyers, but really that's all they do on the Missouri side. So that was the approach, and of course tax breaks for really big businesses. But in my adult lifetime, I don't remember, just working from memory, a major business that pulled up roots in another state to come to either Missouri or Kansas. So it doesn't work except, of course, to drive businesses back and forth across the state line. Doesn't bring anybody here from, Ohio or something that we've ever seen. So along comes Brownback, and whatever you think of this, he's said, okay, here's a direction. It's a new direction. It's one we have not gone before in either Missouri or Kansas. We're going to try it.
Can we say the job growth on the Kansas side of the metro area is pretty much the result of Brownback policies?
Well, I can say it. Mary apparently would gag if I did.
Is that fair to say that?
So let me say this. Look, it started right about the time that the policy got enacted before it even took effect. There is a relationship. Now, are there other factors at play? Of course, there are always other factors at play. But is this a big factor? Obviously, they have one of the lower unemployment rates in the country now. They've got all the job growth in the metro area. They've got business formations at the highest level in the 10 years for which we have numbers. That shows something. On the other side, we've got a governor who vetoes the first tax rate reduction in 92 years. There's a different message there.
So, Yale, is this the result of what is called the economic border war?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to look at long term. I'm not going to make any declaration based on basically 6 months of data here. And I would agree with Woody. There are a lot of different things that contribute to it. I mean, Johnson County's been growing for years and years and years.
Well, construction jobs are going to Kansas City, Kansas, because that's where the construction
they have
is.
Some of the construction going on. But, you know, this whole, and Woody touched on it, the border war stuff, which we all know is destructive. I'd be praising Bramlage, I guess, if somebody said, I'm bringing 2,000 jobs from Ohio to Kansas because of what you've done.
Is it destructive?
And nobody's done that yet.
Is it destructive to those Kansas communities, getting those businesses and those jobs?
It's destructive to the state of Kansas, state of Missouri, because they're giving up all state taxes they would have gotten from those jobs.
But what about the
Therefore,
cities?
what are the cities gaining from it? They don't have city tax rates for those people. That's the same. I mean, they have a little bit of sales tax or whatever, but the property taxes are also often given away, which hurts the schools. Freight quote moving from freight quote from Kansas to Missouri hurts the Center School District. It's crazy.
Well, you know, to make a statement about long-term growth based upon this little bit of information just isn't very likely to be accurate. What's going on in Kansas City, Kansas? Are they building a new casino or so? Is this maybe a stimulus money coming in?
I think it's the Cerner
building roads.
project.
Cerner project. There you go. Didn't that get started under a different governor? At any rate, it's not about Sam Brownback. Sam Brownback's economic news isn't all that positive lately. The report just out yesterday that state revenue for the state general fund is declining faster than they thought. There's one. Also,
well, but let me interrupt you for just a second. You just said this jobs report is too early to make any judgment about. It would sound like the taxation issue is too early to make a judgment about.
These are numbers that the state collects and publishes on a regular basis. No, actually not. It's for 6 months.
Well, so is this others for a year.
They're not comparable, but anyway, if you want to attribute good things to Sam Brownback, then putting the state in a situation where every single person who's looked at it from the far right to the far left said it is not possible to balance the state budget. It is not possible to make up the $1 billion the state is short in financing for schools. And all these things are going to come home, and they're going to come home to bite him and bite the state and the people in it.
Chickens are coming home to roost.
They're coming home to roost, Mike.
Opponents of a new one-terminal Kansas City International Airport have one key argument. They like it the way it is, convenient, comfortable, and familiar. And they also note the expensive price tag of $1.2 billion. Aviation Director Mark Van Loo counters critics by pointing out that maintenance of the current airport will cost $600 million for essential upgrades and renovations over the next few years. And he says that's half the price for a new facility. Now, this argument has been ongoing for several months now. Mary, do you sense any movement on either side or see any sort of compromise on the horizon?
No, actually. What I see happening is that more and more thoughtful people are becoming engaged in asking questions. Number one, what about the airlines? Where are they? Do they really? We make an assumption that the airlines would all just love this and they're all for it. Southwest Airlines is neutral on this subject. Secondly, we have some extraordinarily good reporting being done by Lynn Horsley and Dave Helling and others, asking important questions like, is this really the top priority? Is this the thing we should be spending $1.2 billion in Kansas? Is this the top priority?
Yeah,
I realize
actually, it is a priority.
It is a priority of the mayors. Now, if you've adopted it as a priority, that'll help the mayor, Yale.
Yeah.
But the point is, will it be the priority of the people? And thirdly, the question is, will the people of Kansas City have anything at all to say about this and its cost and who ends up paying the bill? And at what price? I thought Dave Helling's article at the end where he says, look, what we need is a list of the priorities
good
in this.
Lord.
It was a helpful perspective in the sense that somebody is determined this is it. And is the fix in? Are people going to have anything to say or not?
Is there not supposed to be a public vote ultimately?
There could be.
On the bonds that
There
would
will
need to
be,
be
if
approved?
that's the way they go.
So Mary questions this as a top priority. If I understood you correctly, you were saying, amid your sighs and
Yes,
gasps, you were saying that it is a top priority.
Well,
Maybe the top priority.
It is a top priority. Having a good airport is a top priority. Whether it's going to be the single terminal, we don't know yet, and I agree with Mary on that. But I disagree with Mary in saying, oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm feeling pessimistic. No, actually, this group, this 24-member group, is going to look at, and what I definitely urge them to do is look at some of the alternatives. Because people are throwing out ideas. What about connecting them this way? What about doing this way? Because they want to, this is from many of the people who want to keep what we have. And I'm betting we're going to find out that when you try to keep what they have, it's very expensive, and you have to do all these repairs, as Van Loo said anyway. So a single terminal may indeed be the ultimate thing that people are asked to vote on. And finally, God love Dave Helling. But his column the other day where he said, well, I don't know what, how he's priority setting. We've set lots of priorities in Kansas City and gotten a lot of stuff done. Police buildings and fire buildings. The water and sewer repairs are underway. The sales tax for road repairs last year. Kansas City is not perfect. We all know that. I write that every day. If it ever becomes perfect, I'm out of a job. But you write that they're actually attacking some of these problems, and KCI is a top priority in being attacked.
Well, yeah,
Gwen,
drink
let's
the
get,
Kool-Aid.
Mary, let Gwen talk here for a second.
I agree with Mary and Yell. I mean, I can understand Mary's perspective, and I can understand Yell's. For me, it's a change that's inevitable. So therefore, I feel that the best approach is with this commission looking at what is the best way to retain those amenities that we like. But we have to design an airport that speaks to both Kansas City residents and travelers. And when you're on the other side of that equation and you're traveling into Kansas City, there are things that you love about our airport, but there's also some serious inconveniences with the way it's structured now. So I think the best thing for us to do is to be open-minded about it, to be engaged in the process of change, because change is inevitable in this
What a retired labor leader, Herb Johnson, is quoted as saying in a Star story, the city should follow what Jackson County did with the sports complex, keep the good parts and build on those.
Makes sense to me. Look, if you want to know why we have one of the most inefficient city governments in the Midwest, listen to the head of the aviation department when he says, well, you're going to have to spend $600 million, so why not spend twice as much? Well, because it's another $600 million. How's that for a reason? That kind of thinking pretty much characterizes historically, for a long period of time, our city hall. It's nothing new. And $600 million is a lot different from $1.2 billion. And if you can continue to have one of the most convenient airports in America that the public loves more than they love any other airport in America, and do it for half the price, you probably ought to do it, especially when the number of flights into the city is shrinking.
And I agree with that part of what you said, the 600 versus 1.2. My only question is, if you're doing something for 30 to 40 years, is spending that extra $600 million worth it? And I think that's what I want. That's what I really want the answer to, if possible.
What you have to ask these people is whether or not there is any chance that we are going to be the kind of city big enough to make that kind of huge expense possible.
Medium-sized cities are making the expense all the time. We're not talking about a $10 billion Denver airport. We're talking about a $1 billion airport.
Well, let's see what we're
It's
talking
big for us,
about.
but it's not a super airport.
It's only $1 billion.
I know.
The outbreak of gun violence and homicides in Kansas City is aiming Mayor Sly James in the direction of the Michael Bloomberg playbook. Both big city mayors want more gun control legislation. James says the city needs background checks for gun sales, mandatory reporting of stolen guns, and gun courts where the city could prosecute people charged with using illegal weapons. The problem, however, is the city government can't take those actions without enabling legislation from the state, and the mayor is angry that the state legislature is unwilling to give Kansas City that authority. So, Yale, what do you think of the mayor's shot across the bow at the Republicans in Jefferson City who control the legislature?
Okay, I loved it. Now, as I kind of wrote in my column today, Kansas City, if it could, would like to secede from the state of Missouri in many respects. I mean, you were fighting with them on police control. You're going to fight with them on schools. You fight with them on gun control. There are a lot of dissimilarities here, especially with rural / GOP / conservative legislators in charge. And I think that irritates, whatever you want to say, Sly James to a degree, and that's where his what I'd call a passionate blog came out. The ideas he had in there, as you just kind of articulated, were not gun control, take away the guns. They were kind of the reasonable things that a lot of people have talked about. I mean, even some NRA members, oh yeah, background checks, well yeah, oh, classroom safety, yes, we want to do that, make sure kids are safe. So all that stuff is reasonable, but his major point is, but we as a city can't take that next step to protect our citizens who are at more risk of some illegal guns and legal guns sometimes than other people in the state of Missouri. We can't do that because of state law. So I sense his frustration, but I'll tell you right now, it ain't going to change soon.
Do you think he puts maybe too much confidence in changing the laws or adding these new laws?
Well, no, because if you actually read his blog post, it goes on about, no, this is not the only way to do it. We got to have better education. We have to have the Nova
Need
Project.
jobs. He said jobs
No,
are
that
the
was
best
another
way
part
to
of it.
stop
But I mean, it's a
violence.
long, I'm just saying, it was actually covered the waterfront of, we have to do this. Gun control is what a lot of people go to, though. I agree.
But the reality is, we're not going to reduce crime with gun control in the near future.
Yeah.
We have a state legislature, and we have a Congress that is just not going to move forward with that. So what then must the city do? Well, if you look at other cities who've been effective, if you look at New York, they did some out-of-the-box thinking and did some very controversial things, but they've significantly reduced crime and murder rate in New York. So you have to ask the people, what are you willing to give up to address crime and violence in our streets?
Let me set Woody up here. The mayor said, now hang on just a second. The mayor says the best crime-fighting strategy is a job. And yet, he opposes what the Missouri legislature did in cutting income tax rates, which was designed to stimulate business investment in Missouri and hence
Let Woody
cause
speak.
more jobs, right?
Really.
Well, yeah, but of course he would argue that it won't create jobs. So that would be his answer to you. Look, there are things that work. Gwen has just talked about something in New York. Smart police work, tough police work.
Tough police work.
David Dinkins was mayor. They had 2,000 homicides in New York in 1 year. They elected Mayor Giuliani, and he got behind the cops, and they did this stop and frisk and all these things that are still in court, and they cut that murder rate by about 2/3. Now, they did it in Richmond, Virginia by minimum sentences for felons in possession of guns. That's a violation of federal law and state law. So, the mayor should go down to Jeff City if he wants to pick a fight with the NRA, and this might get him in one, and propose that the minimum for felon in possession should be 5 years in Missouri instead of 1 year. And I'd like to see him take that fight on, and I'll be right there beside him fighting.
And the mayor is on the police board. If there's action the police can take, why isn't he initiating it there?
It is outrageous that a state would deprive a mayor of a great city of any ability to control the #1 problem that assaults people. I mean, we cannot have a free society, a free city, or free people if people are afraid to walk down the street and children can't be safe on the front porch. And his outburst was rational, thoughtful, passionate, and absolutely the fight he ought to take on. If he doesn't take it on, nobody's going to take it on. At least it's been articulated. Go, Mayor. Excellent.
Does he do this type of thing often, these outbursts? I saw him being interviewed. He was rather upset, and I know his blog suggests a passionate response to a huge number of shootings over one weekend.
No, I mean, I think this is an emotional issue.
A lot of shootings ought to get
Is that
you
good?
riled up.
Good to see a mayor get involved like that?
Absolutely.
They
upset?
want to tie
Gotta
his
be
hands.
riled
They
up.
can't shut his mouth, and that's important.
Okay.
Let me quote you on that. They can't tie his hands. Oh, they can tie his hands, but they can't shut his mouth.
They can't shut his
The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to undo parts of the Defense of Marriage Act and overturn Proposition 8 in California are giving new hope to gay rights activists who want same-sex marriage sanctioned across the land. The DOMA ruling says the federal government must pay appropriate federal benefits to gay couples in states where such marriages are legal. The California ruling overturns a public vote that outlawed same-sex marriage. Now, both Kansas and Missouri have constitutional amendments banning gay marriage. They can only be overturned by other constitutional amendments or by Supreme Court rulings. No change in either state appears imminent, so what do activists in our area do now, if anything? Gwen?
Well, I guess they can continue to be vocal and try to lobby, but we have a state that's not going to, a legislature that's not going to take any action, and I don't think that there's enough public will to support any process locally. I think the challenge is, that the gay rights community will need to follow the ACLU today, I guess it was yesterday, filed a suit in Pennsylvania challenging the state law, and that would hopefully encourage the local gay rights community to get the support of the local ACLU and start to take file suits at the state level, and then knowing that they will progress to the Supreme Court level until you just have to go on a state-by-state basis to address this challenge. It's unfortunate that this case, we have these laws that prevent gay couples from having the same civil liberties, the same rights as heterosexual couples, and I think that that's something that...
Yet the DOMA ruling is kind of unclear in a variety of circumstances, rather ambiguous about some things.
Well, it is, but the language that Justice Kennedy used was absolutely inspirational and universal. He decided the case on the basis that the federal government cannot make second-class citizens out of gay people who are legally married in now 13 or 12 states in the District of Columbia. And we can't have two classes of people in that DOMA, the federal law against same-sex marriage, was a violation, clear and unambiguously in opposition to the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And that's just marvelous. Now, what will happen, I think, and I've talked to leaders last night, and I talked to Jolie Justice, by the way, there is a hopeful note on the question in Missouri of discrimination against gay people in the workplace. And I think, Mike, that gay people here in our community will focus on that in the coming years, because she's succeeded in the Senate, and it looks like discrimination against gay people in the workplace has a chance because of the trial lawyers and others supporting it.
Now, the Supreme Court overruled a vote of the people in California. The public had voted to ban gay marriage. Now, is that the way the system is supposed to work, the Supreme Court overturning a vote of the electorate in California?
Absolutely. If the vote of the electorate deprives a person of its civil and human rights, absolutely, that's the role of the Supreme Court.
Well, gay marriage wasn't legal. Well, I guess it was at one time in California.
But they just made a ruling that it demeans the individuals and it deprives them of their rights, so therefore they have a right to
So does this ruling take away some rights of the citizens to vote in a ban on something?
In the abstract, Gwen is correct. I mean, the Supreme Court is there to keep the people from just doing whatever they want to do. We have a Constitution that says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. The Supreme Court is very selective, it seems to me, in what they find intolerable under that and what they don't. But look, the California decision is kind of sui generis, so I wouldn't put too much on that. The federal one is a federalism decision, and it basically hands it back to states. If you legalize it, the federal government can't tell you that having legalized it isn't going to work.
But it doesn't say what happens when a couple legally married in one state moves to a state where it is not legal. Do the federal benefits still continue?
That's the full faith and credit.
And what about the people in the military?
The reason they enacted these laws when they did, in some haste, was precisely to get ahead of the full faith and credit question, because it may make a difference whether you enacted this before some other state legalized it. And so Missouri, for example, was in a hurry to pass this law because they wanted to get it done before it was legalized elsewhere. Otherwise, they thought they might have to.
Do we all think that ultimately gay marriage is going? Do we all think? Because I do, not an indication that all of you should, but in the not too distant future, I think gay marriage is going to be legalized across the country.
It will.
And I think it may come as an act of the U.S. Supreme Court.
It will be very confusing. People will move here from other states, and then the federal government will say, gee, what about their Social Security checks, their veterans benefits? And it will be incredibly complex unless then the courts will probably see that. But they will ultimately decide based on Justice Kennedy's language in the Fifth Amendment.
Well, he offended a lot of people by his language, too. It was something
Well,
unnecessarily harsh.
This is
a state issue. Under the Constitution of the United States, this is a state issue.
Right.
Well, but
And
that's
so
what he
if
argued.
Missouri never wants to have homosexual marriage, under our Constitution, they should never have it.
But the Supreme Court can override that.
Yes.
Yes.
If the Supreme Court rules the Missouri Constitution,
They once ruled that a black man had no rights that a white man had to respect.
But the Supreme Court has the final word, does it not, on
Well,
things such as this? I mean,
Do you
if
mean
the Supreme Court rules in a case that gay marriage cannot be outlawed by a state, all right, wait.
No, it doesn't.
We'll
I mean,
answer
we
that
don't have
next week.
slavery anymore, Mike. No, you don't have the final word.
What they may rule is that states can't deny married
whatever.
couples federal
We
benefits.
got to go here. It's time for Roast and Toast,
That's right.
where the Ruckheads speak up and speak out about someone or something in the news, and we start tonight with Woody.
A subject we've already dealt with a little, but it's a toast to Governor Nixon and Governor Brownback, because unless Governor Nixon's veto gets overridden, which could happen, it's very difficult, but it could happen, we are setting up a laboratory experiment here in two different views of tax policy, and Kansas is going to have one very clearly, and Missouri is going to have the other very clearly if Governor Nixon gets his way. And as Mary said, over time, we're going to find out which one of those policies work. Every time two states or nations have been alongside each other with contrasting policies like this, the outcome's pretty much always been the same. I think it will be again, and Kansas will win.
This is a toast to the Supreme Court for striking down the Defense of Marriage Act, and to the ACLU in Pennsylvania for filing the state case, which I hope will start the trend across the nation to make same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states and the District of Columbia.
Last week I had the scare of my life. I had, while shopping at the Overland Park City Market, I touched the leaf of a plant that I had an allergic reaction to, and within a couple of minutes I couldn't breathe. And I thought that was going to be the end of things. However, my friends at the Overland Park City Market came to my aid. Mike Miller, Trish, and all kinds of wonderful people, Janelle Walters, somebody found me Mike's inhaler, and I got a little bit of air. 5 minutes later, I was at KU Med Center, and a nationally recognized toxicologist figured out what had happened to me, and 6 hours later, I walked out of the hospital and drove home. So watch out, develop friends, and thank you for my friends who saved my life. I'm grateful.
This is a toast to the 67 people serving on the 3 commissions that Mayor Sly James has appointed to look into local police control, to look into the charter, and to look into the future KCI. I hope they don't get pressured by the mayor, by the Star's editorial board, by other people in their decisions. I hope they are independent. I also hope they're authoritative so people in Kansas City can get a good guidance from them.
Mary, in case of an emergency, we're ready. And that's Ruckus for this week. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday. Good night.